Hazel was a single woman living with her parents till they died, but for a number of years raised her niece. Her sister had died, and she had responsibility for Carol. Hazel loved her sister, at first welcomed the responsibility of caring for Carol, promised her she would always have a home, but something deep in her heart resented how much this had changed her life and how much it had controlled her own plans and desires, She just could not admit or accept this kind of resentment because she wanted to be a good mother to Carol. Carol had lost so much. And she wanted to raise her right. But she found herself every day just so critical and often speaking very harsh words, upbraiding her about every little thing. Resentment came out of her pores. At night, she'd feel guilty. She'd go to her prayers, and the guilt would just begin to overwhelm her. She would have remorse. She would promise herself the next day that she would not speak to Carol the same way. She would try to encourage her. But she just could not accept that resentment that she had in her heart. She couldn't accept the fact that she was human in that way. When she was confronted with it, she kept saying to herself, I can do this. I can do this. I can stop being this kind of person. I can be the person I want to be. The next day, she was back. Before she knew it, Carol would do something that would irritate her, and that unrecognized, not admitted guilt deep inside of her, that deep resentment, inside of her, would just take over her whole self. And here she was back at Carol, yelling at her, demeaning her. It became a cycle of guilt with a promise to do better, with a subsequent failure, and more guilt, until it became a destructive cycle in her life and in Carol's life. Edgar Lee Masters wrote a book of poetry called Spoon River, and one of the poems is Constance Haley. You praised her, Spoon River, our Aunt Constance, for her self-sacrifice, because she raised the children of her sister as her own. Oh yes, she raised us, she fed us, she took care of us. But every day, she reminded us, as long as you set your feet under my table, as long as I provide a roof over your heads, as long as I put the clothes on your back, you owe me. So praise her self-sacrifice, Spoon River. Her name was Constance Haley. I wonder if James had something like this in mind when he wrote what he wrote. James, an early Christian writer, most likely the half-brother of Jesus. That's the best understanding. That's what Origen said in the middle of the 2nd century, encouraged people to read this book. It's never gotten it's never been widely accepted as a book in Christian circles. How it was late coming to the canon, being included in the New Testament. Martin Luther said it never should have been. He did not like the book. He said it was antithetical to Paul, taught something entirely different from Paul. All he would quote was, Paul said, you're justified by faith through grace. Justified by grace. James says, you show me your faith. You say, I have faith, show me your works. And Luther said it's works righteousness, and therefore it doesn't belong in the New Testament. But it is here, and I think that we're all taking a new look at James today and seeing that there's a lot of grace in this book. And I saw it today in this text. Let's read it. James 3, 1 through 12. Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth comes praise and cursings. My brothers, this should not be. Now when James is speaking, when he's speaking of in tongues, is this. He uses tongue as a metaphor for the words we speak. And some think that he's talking about swearing or cursing or using obscene epithets or languages and words. Well, it's more than that. Hazel never ever swore, Carol. Never did. Never used an obscene word. But she used a destructive word at every moment. A word that brought that little girl's life down whenever she had the opportunity, and resentment boiled to the surface. That's what she did. Never an obscene one. But they were all obscene. No, James is not talking about a swear word. Although that can be a part of it, because we can hurl obscenities at one another in a destructive way, trying to destroy each other. And that's exactly what is James talking about. It does come into it. But he has in mind word, the power of the word. What he has in mind, remember in Genesis when God steps out into the darkness of space, in the very first chapter, and God says, let there be light, and there's light. God created the whole universe with the Word. That's how they saw, the ancients saw the power of the Word. It's so powerful it brought all the universe into being. And that's what James has in mind here. Of course, we kind of trivialize it and make it about saying obscene things or using obscene words. I remember when I was a kid, I was taught all the naughty words. Never say those words. I had a grandmother, she told her there's two things she could not abide. Alcohol and swearing. Boy, she could not abide either one of them. And us kids better never, ever use the swear word in her presence. She had a switch ready at hand for either one of those things. And it was applied rather generously when we were pretending that the little Pepsi, I told you this, little Pepsis, and she gave us in these tiny shot glasses that her brother, who was a drunk, brought home from the bar and gave to her. She knew what they were, but as they were small and it was just the right size to give the grandkids a shot of Pepsi. And we looked Matt Dillon, and we all pretended we were at the Long Branch Saloon, and we go like that with it, pretend like it. And when she come on what we were doing, boy, that was the end of that. And when I was a kid, we would walk, on the way home from school, because we couldn't do it anywhere else. We practiced every swear word we ever knew. Because these were the naughty words you were never to say. And guess what? It felt so good to just go, on the way home from school. Well, that's not exactly the kind of creative or destructive words that James has in mind here, although they can be destructive. He's talking about the word that has power to bring the universe into being, and I have seen how that word can destroy as well as create. The first funeral I ever did was a woman by the name of Gwen James. Never forgotten her. Her husband was Bob. She was a young woman in her late 40s, early 50s, and she had cancer. She went to the hospital not knowing what was wrong with her, and on Tuesday they came in and said, you have cancer, it's very advanced, we're not sure what we can do. The doctor didn't give her much hope, but he was going to look into things. Suddenly she started getting worse. The next day she was very bad, they didn't let her go home. By Friday she was near death. Dr. Raines had done a great deal of research, and he came in Friday morning and said, Bob, I don't know what we're going to do because honestly, I've talked to MD Anderson. I guess they're making some great advances in the kind of cancer that she has. They're doing some wonderful things with radiation and chemotherapy. They're willing to, they got a bed for her. If we could get her there, there might be some hope. But she's so bad now, I don't know if she would make it. Saturday morning, she was setting up, cheerful, talking to everybody, eating her breakfast, and ready to go. She had overheard. She was ready to go to MD Anderson. They were going to save her life. It was great. We had a great weekend with her. Thought everything was in order. Monday she was going to go down to Texas. This was in Nebraska. Monday they were going to fly her down to MD Anderson in Texas. Monday morning came, Dr. Raines came in and said, Gwen, I'm sorry. The bed they had available for you, they don't have. There's been some kind of bureaucratic snafu, but I promise you we'll get you down there. So Gwen says, Dr. Raines, really, what are my chances? I mean, what is my situation? Well, it's a very advanced cancer. Your prognosis is not good, but come on, Gwen, they're doing great things now, and maybe they can really help you. She said, somehow all she heard was, your prognosis is not good. Those words spoken into reality. Tuesday, Gwen died. There was no reason for it. It was not cancer that killed her. It was a negative word spoken into her reality. And she lost all hope. I've seen that over and over again. Oh, do not minimalize the power of the words that we speak. Just like Hazel's words to Carol were able to bend her and shape her and deform her, so our words are just as powerful. Every word we speak into reality has a life and has a thing that it does, and it can either be creative or it can be destructive. And at first glance, it would seem as though James is telling us, now come on, folks, don't speak destructive words, speak creative ones. You can do this. Like, you've got to overcome the power of the tongue. But as I reread this text again and again, one of the things I was struck by was how pessimistic James is in our ability to control the tongue. You know? And I've seen it over and over. People who are resolved not to spread gossip or rumors or involve themselves in negative trash talk, not to run other people down, not to say negative things about others, but they get around a certain group, they get in a certain social setting, a certain event happens, something rises up inside of them, and sure enough, despite all their best resolve to control their tongue, the first thing they're doing is trash talking somebody. And afterwards they go, I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to do that. How come I can't control this tongue of mine? And James is really pessimistic about our ability to control the tongue. Look at what he has to say. Look at what he has to say about that. Verse 8. He flatly asserts that no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, and it's set on fire by hell. Boy, that's a pretty powerful thing. Pretty powerful force. In fact, in verse 2, he starts off the very first verses of this chapter, and he says, if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man. It's a political season. Isn't this so true? It's like that's exactly what we expect of everybody running for high office. They better not stumble in what they say, or we're going to be right there. Right there. And I see it all in the news all the time. I'm so sick of all that kind of stuff. I don't care who's running for office. I wonder why. The way we treat them. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's perfect. He is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. But then he goes on later on in this chapter to say, human perfection is impossible. Human perfection is impossible. He said it already in the first chapter. He says it again. In fact, those illustrations he has about the tongue and the control of it, they're pessimistic. We can put bits in the mouths of horses, and it controls the whole horse. We can take one of those mighty ships, and Lord, we got some huge. I mean, even the Titanic was steered by a little rudder. Not well, but it was steered by a little rudder. And these mighty ships sail, and they're steered by the smallest part of the whole ship. And he said, we can do this, but it's different with the tongue. We can't control the tongue. It's the smallest part of the body, and we still can't control it. Great forest fires are set ablaze by such a small part of our body, such a small fire. And he says the tongue, as small as it is as the human body, stains the whole body, setting it on fire the entire course of life. See how pessimistic he is about our ability to control the tongue? Everything on earth has been tamed but the human tongue. Man, James would say, we can't do it. And yeah, that is a struggle inside us. We're resolved to do it. We don't do it. We feel guilt about it. Then we're resolved again, and then we don't, and we feel guilt, and we resolve again over and over and over again. And what I think James tells us is, yeah, that's what the real reality is. We get caught in this cycle of guilt, shame, remorse, resolve, behavior, failure, guilt, shame, remorse, resolve. And he said, this is not the way it should be. Because we're at war within ourselves. And he is the first to say we make casualties of everybody around us. That's where he got it from. And it's bad. And this is not the way life is meant to be. If this is not how it ought to be, then how can we control the tongue? Because he says to us it's being controlled by the fires of hell. And that's a pretty powerful force. And what he means by the fires of hell are jealousy, selfish ambition, and pride. And whenever these rise up in us, we cannot control our tongues. And how often are we beset by these things within ourselves, and how powerful they seem. In fact, so powerful that James says they're the fires of hell. The quarrels and fights that we are involved in are caused by our innermost passions at war within us. In chapter 4, that's where he says it. And that's why we hurt everybody else around it. That's where that phrase comes from. And how do we break all that? How do we get out of that cycle? How do we live differently? How do we find something that can, the kind of power that can release us from that destructive cycle that we're so caught in? James says there's only one way. It's the wisdom from above. Chapter 3, verse 17 and following is all about this. The wisdom from above is the only thing at work within us that can fight these powerful forces that would lead to this destructive cycle. He says what the deal is that you and I are double-minded. We want one foot in the world and we want one foot in the kingdom of heaven. We want to please the world and we want to please God. And he says as long as that goes on, and as long as we entertain the passions that are a fight within us, then there's nothing that we're going to succeed at doing in this regard. Double-mindedness is the big thing that this epistle of James speaks out against. Don't be double-minded. Find the one thing, will the one will, and that is the will of God. In other words, let the grace and the love of God control your lives, and you will not be caught in this destructive cycle ever again. Let God speak that word of grace into your life. He says it over and over and over again, because when God speaks that word of grace in your life and you're filled with the love of God, a new thing controls you. It's a wisdom from above. Powerful thing. Powerful thing at work in our souls. I have seen not only the power of the word to destroy, but I have seen the power of the word to create over and over and over again. Just the slightest word of encouragement brings new hope to a human life that has been battered and worn. In my personal life, there were words spoken into it years and years ago, over 4 years ago now, and I still can remember the moment and the power of the word and the glory of the life that was given to me in that one moment. It was a particularly brutal semester in seminary, and they can be. It's just tough. It's 4 years of intensive study. You can never make less than a B. A C is failure. and it was a hard semester. We took our comprehensive biblical exams and our comprehensive theological exams all in that one semester. And at the end of the semester, the dean of the seminary walked into the assembly where we were all gathered, ready to go our separate ways. It was all over, but he was giving us the final word. And he walked in, he says, the grades are in, and you will receive them before you leave today, and you'll make A's, and you'll make B's. He says, but I want you to remember that grades can only measure the quality of your academic work this year, or how hard you worked, how well you will achieve what you wanted to achieve, how much you learned. That's all we can measure. I remind you, grades do not measure your worth as a human being. They do not tell us how good or poor a minister that you will ever be. They do not say who you are. They're just a grade. We live not by grades, he said, but by grace. Four years later, I still remember those words of grace spoken into our lives. What a thing it created. How many ministers that day were reborn to their task, sent to serve churches, knowing in their heart the love of God. You can't make that kind of thing inside of yourself. It's a gift that God gives. So many times I wish Hazel could have let the word of God, let God speak a word of grace into her life so she could have loved Carol with all her heart. So she could have been freed from her prison of resentment and jealousy and pain. Will you listen to God's word of grace today? It makes all the difference. That's what James is saying. Listen.